Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight to have back with us, and always an honor, Dr. Richard Land. He's the president of the Southern Evangelical Seminary, and you can go to ses.edu. That's their website, ses.edu, one of the great apologetic institutions in our country, and they always host one of the great apologetic conferences in the fall. But today we want to talk to Dr. Richard Land about, is the world becoming more or less religious? Boy, what a topic. Dr. Land, good to see you, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Happy New Year.
Yeah, same to you. And hope to see you at the NRB if you're going to be there.
I'll be there.
Okay, we'll connect. Well, listen, this is a big topic. Some reports are saying that the Islamic religion or the Muslim faith could be the dominant by the end of the century. Do you think that's true?
No, I don't. I think that the Pew Research, which is predicting this, has a very large caveat in their study. It says, if present trends continue. Well, that's quite an assumption that present trends are going to continue for the next 80 some odd years. And their prediction, of course, is that if present trends continue, that Islam will catch up with Christianity in worldwide adherence by 2050 and then surpass it by the end of the century. But that's predicated upon Islamic birth rates staying high. Historically, that's not happened. As countries become more industrialized and more advanced, the birth rate drops. We have seen the doing away with the one-child policy in China. And of course, as you know, Christianity is growing at an incredibly rapid pace in China. So Christianity is going to increase. And Pew acknowledges that. Pew acknowledges that Christianity is going to increase. It's just that the populations of the countries where Christianity is strong are not growing as rapidly as the countries where Islam is strong. So it's really more of a demographic thing. But to me, the most important thing that comes out of the Pew study, and the most important thing that comes out of the study that was done by Thomas Starks and at Baylor, reported in his book Matter of Faith, is that we have had this secularization myth going on for at least 80 years in the West, in North America and Europe. And that is the idea that as countries become more advanced, as they become more industrialized, as they become more educated, that they become more secular, that religion wanes. And that's simply not true. I mean, the opposite is true. In the countries around the world, we find that Christianity and Islam and other religions are more practiced by people who have more education rather than less education. In the United States, for instance, people who are Christians have a higher education level than people who claim not to be Christians or who claim to be, this new idea of nuns, the N-O-N-E-S's. And Christianity is growing. It's not growing very rapidly. It's not growing in North America or in Europe, but it is growing in Africa. It's growing in South America. It's growing in Asia, particularly in China and in Korea. And when you have people turning away from traditional faith in Europe and in the United States, you find that it's not that they become atheists. In fact, atheists are in decline around the world and are predicted to continue to decline around the world. What happens is they turn to non-traditional beliefs. So in Europe, for instance, you've got a rise in the number of people who believe in elves and who believe in astrology, just like you have people in the United States who believe in New Age magic. It's really a confirmation of G.K. Chesterton's comment that when people cease to believe in God, it's not that they believe in nothing, they'll believe in anything.
Well, we're seeing that, but at the same time, so as you mentioned, Christianity is growing around the world. I can't help but think, and maybe this is a bold statement, I don't know, but I can't help but think that sooner or later the world's going to push back on Islam. It now is not a religion of peace. It's killing people. We're not serving the same God. How much longer do you think the world's going to tolerate this?
Well, actually, there are reports, lots of reports. I personally know of scores, and I've heard about hundreds of reports from missionaries from various mission agencies around the world that they've never seen as much conversion of Muslims to Christianity around the world as they're seeing now. And one of the reasons is if people are looking at ISIS and they're saying, well, if that's what Islam is, I don't want any part of it. I think that they are recruiting some young, disaffected people who have a nihilistic worldview and who are looking, who relish and glory in this death cult that is ISIS. And that's what it is. It's a death cult. It's a death cult that worships death. But remember, 90% of the people that have been killed by ISIS so far have been fellow Muslims who refuse to knuckle under to ISIS and accept ISIS as the only legitimate form of Islam. So I think you're going to see some real fissures and splits that are going to increasingly show up in Islam. I think you may very well see a civil war because of the withdrawal of American influence, which has sort of kept a lid on the sectarian divisions in the Middle East. And now they are in full bloom. And I think you may see a full-scale civil war between Shia and Sunni Muslims, with the Saudis leading the Sunni side, and Iran and southern Iraq leading the Shia side.
Yeah, I can't imagine that Saudi Arabia is going to allow Iran to get the nuke, let alone Israel, and to have kind of an unusual alliance that the Saudis may allow the Israelis to fly through their airspace to take care of the problem. That
they've already said they will. They've already said the Israelis can use their airspace to land and refuel. But, you know, if Iran gets a bomb, and I think that the catastrophic deal that we made with Iran is going to guarantee that sooner or later, the Saudis will get one as well. And the Egyptians will get one, and the Turks will get one. And if there's any area of the world that doesn't need more nuclear weapons, it's the Middle East, because they're more likely to be used there than anywhere else, because deterrence does not work with radical Islam. Radical Islam believes that their goal is to hasten a sort of an Armageddon-like battle, out of which will emerge the 12th Imam and a worldwide caliphate with Islam dominating the world. So when you start talking about nuclear Armageddon or nuclear catastrophe, they say, bring it on.
Right, right. Before I take a break here, Dr. Land, do you think that this war on terror have we become immune to it? We have an administration that in some ways is complicit to it. You're not hearing about it forcefully in the debates. What do you think our attitude is in America about it now?
I think the people are far more concerned about it than their government is. And I think that it is going to be a major issue in the coming presidential campaign. I think it is increasingly going to be an issue in the primaries. Now, it is always true that the number one issue is the economy when the economy is not doing well. That's just a truism. I mean, you know, unless you've been attacked, unless you've been bombed like Pearl Harbor, the number one issue is going to be the economy when the economy is not doing well. And the economy is not doing well for most Americans. Most Americans' living standard is either static or declining. And they're very concerned about it. And they want Washington to put in place policies that will allow our economy to grow and to produce the kinds of jobs that enable people to support their families. And we can go back to a belief that's been true for every generation in American history until now, that your children will have a higher standard of living than you have. Unfortunately, that assumption is now in peril because of the catastrophic policies of our federal government. We have doubled our national debt in the last 7 years. From George Washington through George Bush, we had a $9 trillion deficit. Now it's 18, and going higher as the deficits increase. So, you know, we're mortgaging away our children and our grandchildren's future.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, let me take a break here, Dr. Land. When we get back, we got some more questions about religion in the world getting stronger or less. We'll be right back with Dr. Richard Land. By the way, again, terrific resource, and that's ses.edu. ses.edu, which is the Southern Evangelical Seminary.edu. We'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Okay, we're back with our good friend Dr. Richard Land. What an honor to have him. He's president of the Southern Evangelical Seminary. They host one of the great apologetic conferences in the fall, and you need to go to ses.edu. It's a terrific website, and perhaps even register into their seminary. Dr. Land, along the lines of what's happening, whether religion is increasing or decreasing, whether it's Islam or Christianity, Christianity in America has gone from being recognized and respected to being demonized and pushed under the bus, and we can't seem to change anything. What happened to us in America?
Well, we have been losing a culture war with the progressive left ever since the early 1960s. The weapon of choice for the progressive left was the sexual revolution. All of this can be traced back to the sexual revolution. I believe the devil has figured out a long time ago the most powerful weapon he had was sexual libertinism and pornography, and he's used it to undermine the moral culture of our nation. And so we've had, people who've been appointed to the Supreme Court by progressive presidents. We've had court systems that have been increasingly hostile to the Christian faith and have sought to ostracize Christianity from the public square and from public life, and to relegate religion to the realm of home, hearth, and the church. And at the same time, you've also had an assault of the progressive left within Christianity. If you look at the mainline Protestant faiths in our country, they have the growth pattern of the downward flight path of a rock. In 1960, 45% of Americans were members of the mainline Protestant denominations: the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Episcopalians, the Northern Baptists, the Congregationalists, etc. Now it's 17%. And evangelicalism has grown from about 18% to somewhere between 30 and 34%, depending on how you define evangelical. But the percentage of Christians in this country, so-called cultural Christians, the Pew study shows this has kept dropping. It's down to about 70%. What's interesting, when you go to dig into those figures that are put out by Stark and by Pew, you find that America is getting less religious and more religious at the same time. Now, let me explain that. Fewer and fewer people are identifying with Christianity. It's down to 70% who identify as Christians. But among the people who are seriously Christian, there's a higher percentage of them who are seriously Christian and who go to church at least once a week and who read their Bible several times a week. In other words, the pious are getting more pious, and the culturally attached Christians, the ones who are sort of Christians, the 10 suggestions rather than the 10 commandments, they are the ones that are flowing away. So we're getting more religious and less religious at the same time, which I think is going to make for some interesting conflicts in the years ahead, because the Christians who are getting more serious about their faith are not going to compromise. They're not going to allow the state to take away their right to free expression of their faith, and they're increasingly going to be they're going to have their government weaponized against them and the expression of their faith in the public square.
In the middle of all of this, several years back, the late Pope John Paul II said, at the height of the abortion issue, that the culture of death has been unleashed on the world. And he was referring that primarily back to Roe versus Wade and what this country and around the world has been doing. And we're somewhere between 50 and 64 million babies since Roe versus Wade. We don't know what the count is prior to that. And since then, right at the peak of him saying that, Dr. Land, we heard a word with a different meaning for the first time, the word terror. And now we're seeing terrorism and the cutting off of Christian heads and children and everything else. It seems that we have become immune to death. And even in the shadow of these videos of Planned Parenthood, what outrages for a moment the wisdom of our House of Representatives, supposedly being controlled by conservatives, funded that outfit for another year. We're in a mess.
Well, we are. When the Planned Parenthood videos surfaced, I said that this is going to tell us a lot about where we are as a nation. Have we lost the ability to be outraged by barbarity? And that's what this is. This is just paganism and barbarism. It's really high-tech cannibalism, where we are eating our own young in order to increase our lifespan as merely older and bigger adults. The only difference in value between me and one of those babies that was being chopped up in an abortion clinic is time. That baby is in every sense as much a human being as I am or ever will be. The only difference is that my parents wanted me, and my government had more restrictions on when I could be killed and under what circumstances before I was born, when I was born in the late 1940s. Unfortunately, I think what the reaction to the Planned Parenthood videos tells us is that we have been desensitized. You know, the Bible talks about our conscience being seared, and that as we descend into sinful behavior, we become more and more immune to the outrage of sin. And perhaps one of the greatest things about sin is its ability to beget ever greater sin. And so, you know, I don't know if you remember, but back before Roe v. Wade, we were told, well, if we have abortion on demand, there'll be no more child abuse because every baby will be a wanted baby. Well, it hasn't quite worked out that way, has it? We've had a 7,000% increase in child abuse, serious enough to be attended to by a doctor, since Roe v. Wade. And the reason is you cannot devalue human life in the womb and not end up devaluing human life at every stage of development. And that's why we have more emphasis for voluntary assisted suicide and euthanasia. The culture of death that Pope John Paul talked about has moved from the womb to the nursery, to the nursing home, to the intensive care unit.
Back to a percentage you said earlier, down into the teens, that we may become less religious as a country, or Christianized as a country, so to speak. A lot of these people don't want traditional Christianity. They're embarrassed by it. They see the church as being legalistic and exclusive, to the point where we can't get any pastors to talk about Roe versus Wade. And on the tail end of that would be the same-sex issue. We just don't tackle it. We don't talk about it. I mean, we have a chance in the state of Oregon to stop our taxes paying for 8 abortions a day. We can't get the churches to cooperate. What do we do? What's happened to us?
Well, we're going to have a revival. You know, I don't see any hope for America apart from a spiritual awakening. And that happens when you have it starts with a revival, with God's people getting right with God. You got to be revived before you can be revived. And once God's people start getting right with God, lost people notice, and they want to know what's happened to us, and we get to tell them, and some of them start getting saved. If enough of them get saved, we have an awakening. And when you have a combination of the revived and the awakened, who then apply the truths of Scripture to the evils of society, you can have a reformation. And that's what we've got to have. We're too far gone for anything but a reformation to save us. And let's understand that we are to be involved as salt and light in the political struggles and in the struggles to make abortion more difficult and hopefully illegal in almost all circumstances. But that we're fighting a holding pattern. We're fighting a rear guard action all the time until there is a great awakening. We need to understand this. The government is not a locomotive. Government is a caboose. It's the people who are the locomotive. When the people change, the government will change. I think we have to look in the mirror and face the fact that we have the kind of government our country wants. After all, it is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that's not a very positive reflection on where we are spiritually and morally.
I just don't hear in this presidential cycle, Dr. Land, a persistent and consistent biblical worldview coming from any of the candidates.
Well, I do. I do. I think I do.
Okay.
I think I do. I mean, Marco Rubio talks all the time about his faith and about how he will work tirelessly to make almost all abortions illegal in the United States. Rick Santorum does the same thing. Mike Huckabee talks about it. I find, and Ben Carson talks about it. And in fact, I would argue that we've got more really good candidates running this time in the Republican primaries than we've had. And the sad thing is that they're not doing well in the Republican primaries.
I'm sorry, I didn't frame that question right, and I was kind of going to the top candidates, but you're absolutely right, because I've had Mike Huckabee and I've had Dr. Carson and some of these on, and they certainly are solid in their faith. I don't question that whatsoever.
They talk about it, and they talk about their faith.
Yeah, but I am concerned, and I'll just be blunt, we're getting mixed signals from the front runner as to what a Presbyterian is.
Well, I would say you've got mixed signals from the front runner about what a Christian is.